civic history. Happy 420. I hope you left out all your milk and cookies for Snoop Dogg last night. So today, as it is 420, we will be talking about the history of the movement to legalize it. So, happy 420, as I said earlier. There's going to be a lot of gifts that will make your epilepsy just skyrocket throughout this presentation. So, get ready. Uh, so, legalization has come a long way in this country. More states are fully legal than states that are fully illegal. More Americans live in a state in which marijuana is a fully legal drug that you can buy than Americans who live in states where it's decriminalized or just fully illegal. Uh, a strong majority of states have it legal for medical use. A staunch majority of states also have it as decriminalized, though there are some that make you wonder, like why Hawaii still hasn't legalized marijuana, or why Wisconsin still hasn't legalized marijuana. This map is kind of old, though, because Minnesota has announced its plan to legalize marijuana quite recently, quite soon. But so early uses of hemp and cannabis in the United States. The Jamestown colony in Virginia grew hemp for rope making. These two stoners right here used to grow it for rope making, but they'd also talk about how nice it was to relax with a hemp cigarette after a long day. And it was used as a digestive aid to spur appetite and settle one's stomach. Back when you could go get your snake oil potion of meth, cocaine, cannabis, and opium. But in the early 1900s, criminalization began. It began with the Pure Food and Drug Act, which cracked down on a lot of the snake oilers in the country. No more of those magic potions of cocaine and meth. Uh, Next was it was sort of as usual with most things in America. The Mexican Revolution was going on in the early teens, and many Mexican immigrants had escaped to California from it, and many of them smoked marijuana. Uh, President Diaz here encouraged uh, exportation of marijuana to the United States. Also, and many Americans sort of, yeah, smoked it. Uh, there was also a push for a special tax on marijuana production. Uh, some people accused marijuana of being a poison marketed to the poor. The other big one was during Prohibition. Many Americans turned to marijuana as a substitute for their alcohol. And also, there was groups who were in the paper industry who hemp, uh, did not want hemp to be competing with them for making paper. And there's also the Bureau of Narcotics gets founded around this time. So in the 70s, after years of criminalization and strange taxes, the Controlled Substances Act, which defines controlled substances according to the federal government, with, the top tier Schedule 1 drugs being marijuana and heroin, beneath them being cocaine and methamphetamine, as cocaine and methamphetamine have legitimate medical uses according to the federal government. For example, that stuff you get at the dentist, Novocaine, is really just cocaine but more refined. And methamphetamine is used as an ADHD drug. The 70s was a weird time for this because right as they were in the peak of criminalization, the DEA was really getting formed, the Justice Department was beginning the war on drugs. Alaska accidentally legalized marijuana. Essentially, the Supreme Court of Alaska, after a gentleman was arrested for smoking marijuana in his living room in his home, ruled that you have a right to smoke marijuana privately within your home. You can't buy it, but if you have it, you have that right. Later, though, in the early 90s, they did, through a popular referendum, make marijuana illegal. But also around this time, states and cities began decriminalizing, starting with Oregon in the early 70s, then Maine, Alaska, Colorado, California, Ohio, Minnesota, Mississippi, New York, North Carolina, and Nebraska. Also, the cities of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and Madison, Wisconsin. Then, in the late 90s, California, after a series of bills, died in committee, and in the late 70s, California had a referendum which, with 39% of the vote, voted to legalize marijuana fully in the state of California, which many saw. California legalized marijuana for medicinal purposes and a 10-point victory. If you're also curious about how big California's elections are, just a little side note, the guy who lost the governorship in California got more votes than Charlie Crist and Ron DeSantis combined. That that's just how big California's electorate is. But yeah, of course, this being the 90s, things got weird. First, Bubba, Mr. President Clinton here, announced that if any doctors were caught prescribing marijuana to their patients, they would be cut off from Medicare and Medicaid services, as well as he threatened to cut off Medicaid to the state of California. These doctors then sued the Department of Justice and Medicare and Medicaid, saying that they have the First Amendment right to advocate for their patients. And the Supreme Court ruled that doctors cannot prescribe marijuana as it's legal, but they can recommend drugs to treat their patients, whether illicit or legal. Then, also around this time, the state, Washington, D.C., legalized it for medicinal use, but the federal government blocked it. The Department of Justice also dropped its rule that it was going to threaten to, what's the best way to say this? They were going to threaten to prosecute physicians, but there wasn't quite a way for them to do so. Another thing that happened around this time was the federal government passed a joint resolution that basically disapproved of medical marijuana, but it wasn't a full law. Then in the late 2000s and early 2010s, a second wind of decriminalization happened, starting with Nevada, then the city of Seattle, Oakland, California, the state of Colorado, city of San Francisco, Massachusetts, and Connecticut decriminalizing marijuana, as well as electing Mr. Barack Obama president, who famously said, "I believe marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol," and was quite open about smoking it while he was in college. He also was pretty cool looking. Then, in November of 2012, the elections that changed the world, in addition to Barack Obama being reelected, Washington State and Colorado legalized marijuana. Now, fun fact, everyone thinks that Colorado was the first state to legalize it, but it was actually Washington. As legal as marijuana legalization went into effect in Washington state on the 6th of December, as opposed to the 10th of December in the case of Colorado. Oh, I do have a fun fact about Washington state. The logo for Mr. Washington here, the state seal, comes from a whiskey bottle. Around this time, also in late 2013, Deputy Attorney General James N. Cole signs the Cole Memorandum, which announced to district attorneys around the country that the federal government was not really interested in prosecuting marijuana as much as it used to be, and that medical marijuana, according to at least the Obama administration, was a settled issue. It was the right of federalism. Jeff Sessions, Trump's attorney general, first one, rescinded this memo. I do believe that it's been fully reinstated by Attorney General Merrick Garland because he did say during his confirmation hearings when pressed by Cory Booker that he would, so I'm assuming it's fully back and forth. Also, the Biden administration is pretty pro pot. Then, Vermont became the first state to legalize marijuana, the possession, via the legislature. The state house and Senate voted to legalize it, and Governor Phil Scott, I believe, signed it into law. Illinois in 2019 became the first state to not only legalize it through the legislature, but allow the sale through the legislature. Then in 2018, my home state, Michigan, voted by 10 points to legalize it. Very clever of the Dems to do this, boosting youth turnout to help their governor straight through. Gubernatorial candidate Gretchen Whitmer straight through. 2018, the Farm Bill held a special thing that legalized CBD nationally. If you noticed in 2019, so was when you really saw the explosion of CBD around the country, not just in legal states. Hemp, which was already legal to grow and farm for industrial purposes, was finally get insurance. Banks were now fully allowed to work with hemp companies. Yeah, that was the big one. That banking could, which meant that you could use, actual credit cards and business accounts and not have to store your money in a guarded warehouse. You could store it in like a business bank. The next big one was in 2020 was the MORE Act, which would decriminalize marijuana at the federal level, uh, would move the federal government's ability to enforce marijuana laws to the states. Basically, you'd get pardoned essentially. All sorts of things. It's passed the House, but it's currently sitting around in the Senate. When they tried it before, it died in committee, but who knows? So, anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend feeling generous. And if you get too high today, remember, drink some lemonade and that'll help it go away. Bye.